and welcome to today's book review. I've tried to record this, and after 1 hour of footage I decided to re-record another day, which happens to be today. I wanted to do this book review for a long time. It took me a long time to read all these books, mainly the first one, but I didn't want to review just one book at a time. I wanted to review a few. I feel like that makes a more interesting video. Share with me if that's true or not. I'm just gonna go in the order I read the books because I think that will be helpful for telling the story of my opinions of the books. The first book in this review is 12 Rules for Life.
Here is Mommy.
Thank you very much, my darling Olivia. So the first book is 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson. If you don't know who he is, he's a hot topic in politics and controversy online. He's a clinical psychologist and he's written other books. This was his latest book. It is a very heavy, long book.
Kind of like Kahneman? Would you compare it to that?
Yeah. I think in a previous review I talked about Thinking Fast and Slow and how that was a mental load to read that book. I think this is as well. However, I think many people could read this. So Thinking Fast and Slow, I said that I don't think it's for everybody to read because it is very difficult. This book is very much how some people would describe as a personal development book or a self-help book. However, it doesn't feel like one, which I appreciate because I'm like up to here with personal development books at the moment. So it was really nice to read something that was elevating, positive, educational, that wasn't really like every other self-help narrative, if that makes sense. One of the things that made this book incredibly difficult to read was that I wasn't sitting down and spending enough time reading this book. So I would sit down for 15 or 20 minutes to read the book and maybe be interrupted by my kids once or twice. And it's just, I ended up reading the same page for 20 minutes and it became extremely frustrating. It really requires your attention and your focus. However, once I started sitting down for an hour or finding times when I could read for 1 to 2 hours at a time or 45 minutes to an hour at a time, then it was so much more enjoyable. The way Dr. Peterson presents his ideas are almost like a full circle. So the chapter starts off with something that sounds simple. For instance, chapter 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. That sounds simple enough, right? He gives you this idea and you think, oh, I know what that means. Oh, that's a good point. And then you start reading and you think, well, where are we going? This isn't what we were talking about. And then, oh, that's interesting. And then you're talking about other things, and then he's telling you stories, and then he's relating that to psychological truths and social examples. And all of a sudden you forget what the main point was, but then you come back and it's just all of a sudden at the end of the chapter, it's like this full circle of information that is enlightening and profound and just blows your mind. He's puts a lot of emphasis on the individual, right? Like it's our individual journey and who you are as an individual and the individual's responsibilities and your life as an individual. And when I finished the book, I thought it's really about the individual being the best that they can be in this life for the benefit of themselves and everyone as a whole. And I thought that was a really nice way to look at it. There was something in the book that I thought I really disagreed with him on that I later came to agree with him on. And that was about parenting. He has children, I have children. It felt like a lot of the time he was saying that you need to raise your kids in a way that society accepts them. And I thought, I don't know if I agree with this. I think that in order to be a great person, in order to be someone great or do something great, you have to go against society a lot of times. And if you're trying to please society, or if you're trying to be so agreeable that you're afraid to stand up for yourself, then I don't think you can do anything truly great. And I don't want my children to feel that they have to please other people. I want my children to feel that if they want to stand up for themselves or someone else, I want them to have the confidence to go against another person or a company or whatever it may be. And I was feeling like maybe in the book he was prescribing a way of parenting that made your children very passive, just in a way that they wouldn't stand up for themselves, that they would kind of always be a follower and never take initiative. That's what I saw. I know that he's a clinical psychologist, so he has immense education and research behind him, so he had to have a good point. During the time when I was reading this book, I went to visit a play place here with my 2 kids. Probably about 10, 15 other parents there with all the kids. And there was one girl there in particular who was the same age as my daughter Olivia, about 4, maybe she was a little older, maybe 5, and she was causing havoc. Everybody was having a great time, except when it came to that child. At one point, she got into an argument or something with another child. They come out and she's like crying and the other kid comes out. He's walking behind her and he goes to say to his parents something, and she was holding a basket with toys in her hand and she swings around and hits him in the head. And every parent in that room gasped. And her mother said, "Oh, come here," and then just basically coddled her and didn't make her apologize, didn't apologize to the boy, didn't apologize to his parents. Obviously the boy's parents were a bit shook up, but on the behalf of the mother, there was no attempt to tell her child what she had done was wrong. And the child just went on behaving so badly towards all the other children. I was at the back of the room when all this was happening, and I could see the other parents, and I could feel in the room, it was palpable, how much everybody hated that child and her mother. Not only was she being inconceivably badly behaved, but she was a threat to the other children, and her own mother wasn't protecting the other children by dealing with her child's bad behavior. And just saw all the parents just resented that child. They didn't like her. They didn't like her mother. They didn't want her around their kids. They didn't want her in that play place. It was like a light bulb went off, and I was like, this is what he means. This is what it means to raise your child in a way that society accepts them. You raise your child in a way where they get along and they are kind to other children and adults. Because what's going to happen to that girl? She is going to be raised in a way where she's the victim. When she hurts somebody else, it's not her fault. She has no consequences. And the other kids are going to ostracize her. When she's older, when she's in school, she's going to be a bully. She already was a bully. She's going to be ostracized by most kids. Her teachers won't like her. So she's going to be not liked by most people, even from childhood, and she'll only be told that it's their fault, not hers. She doesn't need to change anything. And it just breaks my heart, really. The worst part about all of this is that she will never understand why. She will never understand why people don't like her. And she will have a very hard life because of that. And that's really sad. That being said, I came to agree, you need to raise your kids in a way that they're respectful, that they behave well under most circumstances. I don't think that they have to be perfect little robots. I'm really against that. But in this case, that made perfect sense. One of my favorite chapters in this book, and definitely one of the most difficult to read, was Be Precise in Your Speech. And that was the chapter where I thought, this book is smarter than me. You know, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, this is really fascinating. And then I think, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface and there's something deeper underneath that I'm not quite picking up on. And I had to really take time to focus and bring it into perspective. That made the reading experience so nice. I really found it as a challenge, challenged my comprehension, my reading skills. It definitely made me a better thinker, which is what I'm always striving for with books like this. One thing I think is really interesting to state is that there's a lot of religion in the book, even though the book is not itself religious. I think that if you are against Christianity or against biblical scripture, it would be very fascinating and interesting and probably good for you to read this book, because he references that a lot to illustrate psychological phenomenons and social phenomenons. For me, as somebody who's really familiar with Christian religion, I found it very enlightening. If you like that kind of thinking and taking new views on things that you never thought about before, you will love the book. It's definitely, like I said, kind of a heavy read for people who aren't used to reading books. It may be difficult, but I think sitting down with solid, good chunks of time to read it, you will really enjoy it. And I think it would definitely make you a better thinker, and that, for me, was the most important part. Going right in order of what I read next. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. First of all, I have to thank my dear friends Mitya, Urshka, and Primož for sending me this book. Love it or hate it, I will always appreciate being sent a book from anybody. I love books. And even though I read a lot on Kindle or on my iPad or iPhone, I will always cherish books. Physical books. I know it's not convenient in this day and age to take a book with you as much as it is to have your phone, but there's something I love about real physical books. They're just so precious to me. Thank you again for sending me this book. I was really looking forward to reading this book after reading 12 Rules for Life, because 12 Rules for Life was a intense, difficult book to read. And after reading that book, I thought I need something light and easy to read, because that was a big mental load and my brain needs something to kind of recuperate. In that sense, this was perfect. As a whole, I can say I did not like the book, which I feel so bad saying, because it was sent to me by such nice people, and you said it was like one of your favorites. I do have to shout a disclaimer though, that I don't follow Trevor Noah, I don't watch his show, I'm not a big fan of him, so I think if you are a fan of him, if you love his show, if you find him really funny, I'm sure you will like this book. One of the reasons I did not like this book was because it was so simple in writing style. So simple to a fact that it's poorly written. You know, if we're having a conversation and you take the transcription from that conversation, put it in a book, it wouldn't read well. And that really feels how this book is written. One thing I really liked about this book was that he really highlights racism in the culture in South Africa. He had a really hard life, a really difficult life, shocking in many ways. It's stories from his childhood and his life in South Africa. Born a Crime refers to the fact that it was illegal for a black person and a white person to have a baby together. So his mother is black, his father is white, and hence he's born a crime. However, that was the first thing that bothered me. The book is called Born a Crime. He tells the story of how he was born and his mother lied about his father, and there he was born a crime, and that's kind of the end of it. It's not revisited, it's not a common thread throughout the book. That alone was like, it just seemed almost clickbaity. It was really more about racism than it was about him being born a crime. There are stories when he's like an outcast because he doesn't really belong to any group and he doesn't know who he belongs with, but it wasn't so much about being born a crime and how that he, like the illegal aspect of his life. It's just more like he was a naughty kid in a bad neighborhood and had a really rough life. All these things made it just feel like, what are you doing writing a book? Or your editor didn't do a very good job, or like you don't know how to write. You're good at writing bits. And that was another thing that bothered me, is it felt like a lot of the stuff in here, it felt like he had written a bit for his show and thought, I'll put that in the book, that sounds good. So much so that in parts, which bothered me more than I could say, it was literally written, and then we were like, cool, that's neat. There's so many other ways to say that. And then we thought, and then it occurred to us, and then we said, when you write, we were like, and you say something, or they were like, and they went and said something, but you don't say said, you said went. It's like a Facebook post or something. It's just so badly written. And maybe it's just because I've read a lot that bothered me so much. Like, I couldn't handle that. And then I felt like it felt kind of confused, the book. Like, it went between serious stories about racism and abuse, really terrible things, to like making jokes and trying to be funny. It just didn't feel like it flowed. Like, it didn't feel like it knew what its purpose was, who this book was. It didn't know it, you know? It didn't feel coherent. There was one paragraph in this book that I thought was original, that I thought was brilliant, that I thought could have been expounded on further, that would have been so interesting. I often meet people in the West who insist that the Holocaust was the worst atrocity in human history, without question. Yes, It was horrific. But I often wonder if African atrocities, like in the Congo, how horrific were they? The thing Africans don't have that Jewish people do have is documentation. The Nazis kept meticulous records, took pictures, made films, and that's what it really comes down to. Holocaust victims count because Hitler counted them. 6 million people killed. We can all look at that number and rightly be horrified. But when you read through the history of atrocities against Africans, there are no numbers, only guesses. It's harder to be horrified by a guess. When Portugal and Belgium were plundering Angola and the Congo, they weren't counting the black people they slaughtered. That's original. That's very profound. That gives you cause to think. That gives you cause to go, wow. Like, it gives me goosebumps. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think it would be an idea worth exploring and expounding on, and he didn't. It's literally like a thrown-in paragraph in a whole book of other stuff that's just unrelated. I feel really bad giving this book such a harsh review because it was a gift, and it's like, the people who sent this to me love this book. I just want you to know that even though I have a lot of harsh criticism for this book, I really appreciate it being sent to me. I really do think a big reason I'm so hard on this book was because I just finished a book from a clinical psychologist. You know, the reading level for that book was up here, and the reading level for this book is way down here. And I think the contrast maybe makes this book seem worse than it actually is. That's my opinion on this book. Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. If you love Trevor Noah, I'm sure you'll love the book. If you don't like Trevor Noah, do not read the book. The last book I read, the most recent book I read, The Catcher in the Rye by Jd Salinger. This is not the first time I've read this book. I think this was the third or fourth time I've read this book, but it has been a long time since I've read it, and I love this book so much. This is a great example to give contrast to this, because this is also written in seemingly very simple English. You know, it's supposed to be written by someone who's 17, telling a story about when he was 16. So it's not supposed to be very lofty, elevated English. It's just simple English, but it is written so much better than this book. Obviously, the author is brilliant. Where do I even start? I don't know. It's just, if you haven't read this book, you have to. What else can I say about it? It's basically about Holden telling you, the reader, a story about himself when he was 16. The first time I read this, I resonated with him so much. Hilarious and very relatable at the same time. As a teenager, I related to him and his struggles, and it's like written in a simple to read, easy to read way, but has a lot of profound things in there. Some of them are sad, some of them are meaningful, some of them are like incredible, brilliant. It's like he's wandering around looking for someone or something to belong to. He's searching for something to fill this loneliness in him. Also has just a ton of angst. He's just kind of upset about a lot of things and gets upset about a lot of things. I remember the first time I read it, I laughed so hard reading this through a lot of things. I just found it incredibly hilarious. I feel like you could get much better reviews about this book from a literature standpoint from other people than you could from me, because I'm not smart when it comes to literature. I'm not an expert in English or English literature. I just love this book very dearly.
I read this book when I was 16, 17, and I thought it was dumb.
Dumb as in just like a boring story, or
yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't get his need. I don't know if other readers, like Slovene readers reading it in English, they see such appeal in it. I didn't. It seemed to me like a form of...
You read it in English?
Yes. The way it occurred to me back then. I haven't read it in a long time. Maybe now I would not think the same. But I think it appeals to a specific type of a person, and it doesn't to the other.
Maybe you have to have a little... You have to struggle with a little depression in your life to get this book. You can see him struggling with, like, loneliness and stuff like this throughout the book, and at least I found that relatable.
I didn't get it. Like, the whole book, I read it, and at the end I thought, what's the point? I don't understand why my teacher...
You didn't get anything like metaphorical out of it.
I did, but it was not like, it didn't touch me.
That being said...
So maybe your audience can share about this. Maybe your audience should read this book and share their thoughts if they find it relatable.
I'm really, really tempted to start a book club.
Real quick, my English teacher thought it's the most amazing book ever.
Really?
And I felt bad, like when I told her I didn't like it, she nearly stopped liking me.
I love this book. But I just think there's a lot of things that are like slight things that are profound. One of the things, which is like a better example than I could ever give, is one that John Green gave. If you watch John Green and Vlogbrothers, but he gave the example, he's talking about his brother's baseball glove. And he said his brother Ali's baseball glove, he's talking about him in the present tense, and then he says, he's dead now. And just the way that he transitions from talking in the present tense about his brother and his mitt to saying, now he's dead, gives you as a reader such a, like, it's so shocking, like it's jarring, and it's these little nuances in the book, or the way that Holden talks about the ducks in the pond, right? And he's asking about the ducks in the pond, he's asking everybody where the ducks go, and it's because he's really thinking about his life. So anyways, I think you can see that this video is over. This is not going very well anymore. Sorry I didn't get to give you a more in-depth look at this book, but I just feel like it's such... It's almost like it's too personal to me. It's too close to me for me to give a really, like, real review of it. I'd almost rather just read it again and talk about it with somebody as I read through it. And, like, chapter by chapter be like, oh, this, then this, then this. If you've read this book, comment below. I feel like it's one of those books that people love it, or they, like Luca, didn't get it, hate it. I love this book. I'll read it again in... who knows, a year or so.
If you like this book, like it. If you do like this book, give me a thumbs up.
Smash like, anyways. So, have you read any of these books? What are your thoughts? Comment below. If I start a book club, would you be a part of it? I don't know if I want to commit to making a book club, but I just love reading, and I think it would be fun to talk about that with other people. Maybe we have a virtual one, you know? I don't know. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Like this video if you haven't. No. What was the thing I said the other time that I really liked? If you feel like liking and subscribing and you haven't already, welcome to do that. And I will see you next time.